Hi, everyone. It's Tanya, and I'm here with one of my business school friends, Miss Liz. Today, she is going to tell us a lot about doing digital marketing campaigns, something she's an expert in. Say hi, Liz.
Hey, how are you?
All right, great. So as usual, I'll give you guys a quick rundown before we jump into the nitty gritty. So first, Liz is going to go ahead. She's going to tell us about her background in marketing, her background in digital marketing. And then we're going to go ahead and do a little 101 on digital marketing. And then, of course, we'll get to my favorite part, which is going through a little bit of a business case. And then to wrap it up, we'll go ahead and give Liz a chance to give some of her last thoughts. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, so Liz, kick it off and tell us about you.
Yeah, sure. So my background, most notably after business school, I like to say that I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've built businesses inside of Disney parks and the Walt Disney Organization and, on the sort of B2C side, and then on the B2B side in an enterprise software company called Jive Software. And then lastly at Timshell, which we built a platform called The Groundwork, which was marketing automation tools for nonprofits and political campaigns. So I've run the gamut from product management all the way to product marketing, and then also running and establishing a marketing department from scratch. But always with a foundation in tech and digital, and of course, along the way, as we've grown up with social media and other more digital channels that are kind of experimental that I can talk about as we go through.
Okay, so Liz, since we've been out of business school, I feel like I've been bombarded with the conversations or the articles about social media and digital marketing and how you just have to do it as a part of your business strategy. But I sometimes get confused by the jargon. Can you, and I'm sure others do too, just tell us what it means to have a digital marketing campaign?
Sure. Yeah. And I want to kind of hone in on one thing you mentioned about in line with your business strategy. I think a lot of people glom onto the shiny penny, whether it's growth hacking or content marketing or inbound marketing, all of these words. I don't know why we as marketers like to come up with new words for what is essentially just communication and technology, right? Those are the two things together. So I would say first and foremost, one thing as marketers that we need to remember is everything needs to be first rooted in your strategy, in an understanding and an empathetic embracing of your target audience. So let me back up there. Thinking about if you have a product that is focused on, improving the lives of baby boomers, maybe they're not going to be on Snapchat. The fact that that's just sort of in the ether, and obviously they're IPOing soon and all these other things, it might not be a good fit for what your strategy and what your product actually does. So first and foremost, take a step back, know what your go-to-market strategy is and how your audience is engaging with specific channels. So that's the most important thing. Where do they hang out? What do they read? How? And then not only where do they hang out, but how do they hang out on those channels? So as new things come on board, or as Facebook evolves, as Twitter evolves, you really have to be cognizant of what is the purpose of those channels. So Facebook, I go there to keep up with my friends and family, to look at their pictures of their families, their babies, other things that are happening in their lives. Twitter tends to be more of a news channel, so you always want to be seen as somebody who is participating in the right mindset and an appropriate sort of messaging way on those channels, rather than being an interloper and interrupting what people are naturally doing on those channels. So I think, I kind of went in a couple different directions there, and we can talk about more of how do you think about a multi-channel strategy, to use some jargon there a little bit, but how do you most appropriately build that digital marketing campaign? And it's not just about social. Right. It also, people forget that it includes email, which is still one of the top converting channels and tactics out there, especially in the B2B world. But you need to think about across the board. Now we've got texting, we've, SMS text, we've got email, we've got, if you're working with a mobile product, you've got in-app notifications, you have social media, all these different channels that collectively need to ladder up to ultimately what you're trying to drive with your business strategy.
All right. So you already started getting into something I love talking about, which is best and worst practices, or I guess things to do, things to avoid. And one of the things I feel like I end up in talking about a lot, especially with young entrepreneurs or just small businesses that are sort of trying to get from platform or plateau number 1 to plateau number 2, is they start thinking about their digital marketing strategy. And they're just so convinced they need social media to move forward. But, you know, like you said, sometimes they're going after baby boomers who are just not on Instagram, but they put social media there. That said, you know, when should someone be thinking about a digital marketing campaign? Like, what part in their strategy development is this something they should be thinking about versus when is it just something they shouldn't even be touching upon?
Yeah. It's interesting, right? As marketers, we fundamentally are responsible for attracting new people to our product or service, so acquiring new customers and retaining them. And I think that a lot of times today, we as marketers put all of our focus on acquisition, and we look at how many people converted, how many people clicked this button, how many people liked, you know, this piece of content. Fundamentally, I think that's very short-sighted when you're thinking about that strategy. So I would encourage everybody to think about the entire sort of customer journey, as it were, or buyer's journey. You've heard this, you know, kind of talk about in a lot of different ways. All that really means is, you know, what are all of the touch points that you're having with someone who could be remotely interested in what you're trying to sell them up until the point where they're considering it, they've actually purchased something from you, and then how do you extend the relationship with them over time to be something that as you build new products or as they have new pain points that you're addressing that. So I'm kind of old school, right, where I like to use Post-it notes and paper and actually sort of map out and put in front of myself what are all of those different touch points. And then you actually think about the customer or potential customer and their mindset along all of those different places in the journey. And then you start to think about what channels are most appropriate to deliver my messaging for whatever stage they're at in the journey. So for example, let's say you have a new product. For me, I'm a mom of 2 kids, right? There's a new product out there that helps me plan summer camps for my kids or different kinds of events or something like that. That's going to be inherently a social product. And so I want to think about being, you know, where those moms are when they're thinking about planning those activities. So it's going to be somewhere, you know, in my calendar, maybe in groups that I'm in on Facebook already, or when I'm thinking about, you know, going to my Parks and Rec department, or, you know, other those places when I'm really thinking about making those types of purchases. So that's where you really want to be. You want to make sure that you've aligned again to that mindset where you can be at sort of the point of which what you're trying to sell them is always top of mind, not when I'm thinking about, you know, something for work or doing something else. Like I'm not going to think about using LinkedIn to necessarily advertise for summer camps for my kids, right? Because those two things are incongruent in terms of what my mindset is there. So I don't think that there's necessarily a time in the sort of growth of the business necessarily when social is appropriate and social isn't, or digital marketing is appropriate or it isn't. It's more put yourself in the timeline of the customer or the potential customer and think about what are those activation points. Sometimes, you know, it's even offline, right? When you're just starting out and you, especially if you have something that's a very personal type product, you want to get out and start shaking hands and talking to people and doing more things offline to build that sort of interest. And then you want to supplement that or augment that, as it were, with, you know, marketing when they're, again, in that same mindset. So I don't necessarily have a hard and fast rule of growth of the business Facebook works at this point. It's really having a really deep understanding of all of those different touch points and experiences along the customer journey. And, you know, when you have somebody who is already interested in your product, the next piece is, sending them, maybe they've raised their hand, they've done their research already, they're ready to talk to you about whatever the product is, or ready to do a trial. You want to make sure that you have the most relevant content out there on your website, or you're sending them an email because you've already been tracking their behavior thus far. So we can get into sort of some marketing automation tools on like how to figure out what the right time is. But my ultimate takeaway is understand your customer's journey end to end, and that's when you start activating different channels.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, so for my current viewers, you've probably heard this spiel before, but just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. For my next set of questions, this is especially for those viewers who are entrepreneurs or work in small businesses, or just tend to be the pinch hitters on their team. Often they get thrown into a situation such as having to figure out how to do a campaign, and they have limited time to get up to speed. Do you have any suggestions on things that they can, or resources they can access in order to get up to speed?
Yeah, so in terms of, I would say like time-saving tools or things like that, again, as I was mentioning, you really have to know your audience and where they're going to be most receptive. But if you're still in sort of test and learn mode, there are tools like MailChimp, for example, especially at the startup level, where if you might have a small email database and you want to start testing, sending people some content, MailChimp is pretty much free. And their analytics dashboard is fantastic. So you can quickly see who's opening, who's clicking through, who's actually converting onto your website. So you can actually integrate Google Analytics and MailChimp as well. So you can start to see that end-to-end flow, like what I was talking about, of that the customer journey, one is at a mindset level, but two is at a very like tactical, okay, where did they actually click and where did they go? I think, Google Analytics, again, free tool for the most part. There are some paid kind of add-ons, but that's something that is integral to understanding what's going on your website. Obviously, building a good website, things like Squarespace, Wix, all of those tools, they come fairly templated at this point. And I know a lot of them have free trials. And then with even with some of the social channels, if you want to do some listing, you could use tools like Hootsuite. Hootsuite also has some tools for planning and actually doing some kind of A/B testing around messaging and things like that. But I do find, frankly, that the Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn to a certain extent, Instagram, all of their campaign planning tools are pretty much free, and they give you a lot of sort of forecasting metrics because they've gotten to such a scale that you can say, okay, I want to target this very specific audience. And you can get real specific. You can even upload a CSV file of people that you already have in your database. So that's something that people kind of forget about. But if you have, a CRM or a certain type of customer management tool, or even a spreadsheet that you're using, you can upload that into those files. And they also have tools to map to, people or users that look like the people that you have in your database already as well. So that can be a pretty powerful tool as you're going out to try to segment the market and then testing and learning. And frankly, a lot of those, when you're doing paid ads on social, you can spend as little as $10 and, get some legit data back. So don't be afraid to just spend a little bit and test and learn and kind of tweak, and then you can start doubling down on what's working over time. Paid search is another thing that I think people forget about, but it's a great way to test a lot of your keywords, to test a lot of your initial messaging, to take a look at what your competitors are doing as well. You can learn a lot in the tea leaves of what words that they're bidding on. There's a couple different websites. One that comes to mind called spyfoo.com, where you can go in and put in your competitor's website and you can actually see all the words that they're bidding on. So you can figure out, so your SEO, search engine optimization strategy around that, or if you want to start competing them head to head on certain keywords. Those are some, sort of top of mind pieces. But again, none of these things should be done in a vacuum. I typically like to work in an agile software, kind of product development type way of working in sprints. So every single week, whether it's getting together by myself or with my team and looking across what are all the experiments that we had in flight this past week, what did we learn, and how can we kind of test and iterate on those. Everything, again, from email to social to your website to anything that you might have done in person, events, etc. And the response that you got is really important to have that sort of portfolio view, as opposed to just looking at Twitter or just looking at your email in a vacuum.
Oh, I love it. And I am, is it lame for me to say that I'm totally doing spy foo on Barbara Corcoran's website and a couple of those other people from Shark Tank?
Nice.
Those are my weekend plans, guys.
Yeah.
So moving on to the case. So we've talked a little bit about like thinking about how do you actually start building up your campaign. Let's talk a little bit in case about how to convert some of the your social engagement into actual dollars.
Mm-hmm.
For a little bit of background, something I hear a lot is, hey, Tanya, I have all of these people who follow me on Twitter. I have all these people who read my newsletter. And I'm like, great. Does that convert to dollars? Can you walk us through some of your experiences in terms of actually, going from having the engagement to actually converting them into dollars and how you did that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one example, a few years back, going back to, I worked with Disney Parks, and as part of my role there, I managed the relationship between two different business units. So Disney Parks and Disney.com, which at the time was the Disney Interactive Media Group. What we saw was, a few million adult fans coming to Disney.com on a monthly basis, whereas the majority of their normal traffic was kids, going to watch Disney Channel videos or the latest and greatest on their favorite character, what have you. But we found that there was this, highly engaged fan audience. They were consuming Disney history articles that we had on the website. They were looking at videos of some of the characters that have been around, core characters like Mickey and Donald, etc. But they were also engaging with other video content that we wouldn't have anticipated. So what we did was we had all of this data, right? Of, okay, we know these people or certain segments of this group had visited a Disney park or a resort in the past. And then there were some that had never done that, but nonetheless were Disney aficionados, as it were. Especially with the group that we knew had affinity for the brand already, but had not visited a park, there was a really ripe opportunity to expose them in a way that felt consistent with their content experience across Disney.com. So a couple things that we did. One was we went down to Walt Disney World and filmed a series called Taste of Disney. And granted, mind you, when I started this, I literally had no budget. So I had to go down to Florida and, pitch to the brand managers down there to carve out a little section of the budget to basically pay for a pilot for this video episode. And we called it Taste of Disney. This is an opportunity. We kind of interviewed almost like Food Network style. If you guys have seen like diners, drive-ins, and dives, whatever. We had a mom and daughter host kind of team, and these women were like friends of Disney parks, again, like not professional video hosts or anything like that from Food Network or anything else, but just to film the pilot. We interviewed the chefs. We had recipe content that went around the 3 to 5 minute video interviews. We also had some downloadables and other sort of background bios about the chefs, just to sort of bring that content to life. And so we filmed this pilot that had 3 episodes, ran it on Disney.com, and then around all that video content was additional sort of not necessarily advertisements, but additional content that was all about Disney parks. And then ultimately we as well had like special offers that we would put as an end cap to the video, or a pre-roll kind of 15-second spot that basically talked about, 30% off an annual pass, for example, to Walt Disney World. So by integrating the brand, Walt Disney World, into video content that these individuals were already consuming, and then coupling that as well with very interesting, overview articles about the chef and his or her background, with downloadable recipes, with shareable photos and things like that, it created this immersive experience. And we saw quite a significant increase in traffic actually clicking through to explore more of Walt Disney World. So ultimately, we built out video content for almost all of the brands. So Disney Cruise Line, we launched the new Disney Dream, it was kind of a rinse and repeat, but every single week I got a report and was working with an analyst on my team to see who is clicking where, how did they traverse the sites from going from Disney.com into Disney Cruise or to Walt Disney World. We put tracked hyperlinks, and I'm going to get a little technical, with UTM codes. But for those of you who are doing digital marketing campaigns, UTM codes are your like golden nuggets, basically, because those are the pieces of code that you append to the back of a URL. And now you can track anybody who clicks on that. It's basically like a cookie. You can track all of their interactions through your website, where they converted, where they dropped off, where they engaged with you or didn't. And these can be used in every channel, email, on social, etc. So anytime that you have a campaign, you have this sort of set of UTM codes that rolls up to that campaign, so you can see the overall conversion number. And that's one way to kind of connect things from a multi-channel perspective. So every single week I got that report. I could see what was converting into revenue, what wasn't, doubled down on the stuff that was, and hyperlinked everything, whether it was in an article, whether it was on a video, whatnot. And data just became our friends. And so in 18 months, we ended up creating about an $8 million incremental business as a result of kind of doing these short sprints, testing and learning, but also creating fully immersive content experiences that could be easily shared, easily downloaded, easily consumed by those people who are already coming to the site.
I love it. I not only do I love the, what you guys did in order to convert, people who are already engaged into actual dollars. Mm-hmm. I also love the fact that this is a very entrepreneurial experience. Mm-hmm. So, I know a lot of you out there are considering, do I go off as an entrepreneur? Do I stay with a current job? I think Liz is a great example of how you can be in a very large and well-known brand and still be able to, carve out a new business and really make your stamp. So please take notes on that. Anyway, we're close to the end of our time. Before we wrap up, Liz, do you have anything left to say?
I think, my flag right now our soapbox that I'm on is really trying to convert all of us to think about being marketing scientists. We have so much data out there at our exposure or at our disposal. Don't be afraid of it, embrace it, but also really take this idea of testing, learning, and iterating to heart, and do great things, build great businesses through marketing.
Awesome. All right, guys, that's it for today. Thank you, Liz, for your time. Thank you, everyone else, for joining in. And don't worry, Liz will be back soon. What we're going to talk about is in the works. Anyway, bye.
Bye.